Let's talk about feedback because I see the same situation when we give feedback. Many leaders believe that they are very clear, they are logic, but sometimes the message activates resistance instead of responsibility. So what happens when feedback is framed in other pattern that doesn't match to the person's motivational style?
Right, right. And a lot of people don't really know what feedback is. So they just tell you what you're doing wrong. Okay. Then there's the people who've been on a management training course and they learned the feedback sandwich, which just makes people feel bad. The feedback sandwich is you say something nice, you flatter the person, then you tell them the bad news of what they did wrong, and then you say something nice. And unfortunately, and this has now been proven in literature as well, in some of the research, is that we have programmed people with the feedback sandwich so much as soon as they hear a compliment from their boss, they're already ducking just to get ready for the bad thing that's coming next. But what if you could separate praise from critique? And there's a couple ways you can do this. So praise, you want it to be short and sweet because otherwise the person's going to think that you're just buttering them up so you can say something about what they did wrong or not good enough. So my idea about praise is you phone the person when they're not going to be there, when they won't answer the phone, so you can leave them a message and you say, hey, I'm very happy about the report you submitted because, and then you tell them the positive consequence. And then you say, thanks so much, and you hang up. Or you walk into their office and say, thanks for that report. You did it really well because positive consequence. And then you say, it was great, and you leave. If you stay, the person's going to wait for you to criticize them. So that's why you have to leave. So my recommendation is separate praise from criticism. Now, instead of just criticizing or giving negative feedback, what do you do when you need something to improve? Well, one of the models I developed is called the suggestion model. And that means you need to know as a leader, what is it that you want the person to do instead? And then you use the 4-part suggestion model. So the first part is make a suggestion. My recommendation for the next report is that you double check all the numbers to make sure they are correct. Then you say what problem that avoids, because that way we won't look bad. Step 3, then you say, what is the positive consequence of my suggestion? That way we can have accurate numbers when we present it to the client. And then the last step, this is the pièce de résistance. The last step is you say why it's easy. So let me do it all together. 1, 2, 3, 4. Step 1, my suggestion is that you double check the numbers on the report before you submit it. Step 2, that way we won't have any inaccuracies. Step 3, the benefit. And that'll make us look good in front of our clients. Step 4, why it's easy. It'll just take you a few extra minutes to double check. Right? So the suggestion model, now that means you need to know what you want the person to do instead and then make a suggestion. Now, what if you really have to critique somebody? They really screwed up. Well, I have a formula that I call the bad news formula, and I designed it for when you have to say something that the other person is not going to want to hear, because that's bad news for them. And the bad news formula uses 2 key words, the word but and the word and. And the idea is that you tell them the bad news, but you reduce the amount of stress and distress that you cause the other person, because nobody wants to hear bad news. So you start with the bad news, then you say the word but, and then you find some good news. Now, people say, what if you have no good news? You find some good news is the answer. So bad news, but good news and good news and good news. Okay, let me do an example about the inaccurate numbers in the report. There were a lot of inaccurate numbers in your report, but the structure of your report was good. That's good news. The client needs the information, and the client needs the information that you've prepared. That's also good news. And I think if you take a few extra minutes to double check everything. It should be fine next time. That's the bad news formula. Bad news, but good news and good news and good news. These are 3 ways for you to keep your employees more motivated by how you talk to them and how you coach them to improve their behavior. Praise, what I liked and the positive consequence, suggestion model, the 4 steps, and the bad news formula when you actually have to do a critique. And these are essential leader tools, and they really help your employees grow and stop them from being demotivated because they didn't do it perfectly.
That's great. Thank you. This topic made me think about another often situation that I've met. And let me see like this. In many teams, when they are in a meeting, I usually see artificial harmony, you know? Everyone is silent, everyone nods, everyone agrees, and nothing changes. Some people avoid conflict. They don't like to have a conflict. Others dominate the conversation. And sometimes frustration just sits in the room unspoken. But you said earlier something very, very powerful. People don't think wrong, they think differently. So let me ask you this. When 2 intelligent people disagree, is it often not about who is right, but about what each one values most?
Yes, that's exactly what it's about. And each of us values certain things, or we have certain values. And in a conversation where we have different opinions, most people, because they haven't learned how to disagree, will just tell the other person what they've gotten wrong. And then the other person tells us what we've gotten wrong. But neither of them has taken the time to say, well, I'm evaluating the situation by this value or by this criterion. So we don't know why one is better, one is right, one is wrong, because we're not revealing this. And one of the insights I got from the language and behavior profile, the LAB profile, is that there is a consistent structure when there is conflict. Consistent. So, for example, one of the patterns we look at in LAB profile is where does a person make judgment calls and decisions? And there's 2 ways that people make judgment calls. And by the way, it depends on the context. All the LAB profile patterns that you have may be different at work, or when you're at home, or when you're on holiday, or when you're buying a car or doing grocery shopping. It's all contextual. That's what makes the LAB profile different. It's not a personality profile. It's a motivation and behavior profile, which means these patterns, these triggers can change depending on the context. So back to conflict, when 2 people are having conflict, each one of them goes internal. I know what I want, and don't you tell me what I should do. This is internal. That's when someone makes decisions based on their own internal values and standards, right? And these people as leaders say, well, I know when I'm doing a good job. Why do I have to give feedback to other people? Don't they know? Well, possibly not, because the other pattern is called external. And that's when you get motivated to have help with your decisions and be guided by outside experts, or to be mentored, or to be coached. And by the way, if you put someone with a more external pattern facing the customers, they do a better job, because when the customer tells them they're unhappy, they believe it. If you put someone who's very internal at work serving the customers and the customer is not happy, they think the customer is an idiot. Or they could, not always. So there's no right or wrong pattern. But in conflict, both people are highly internal. I know I'm right, and I know what's important. They don't tell you what's important, but I know I'm right. And they have that away from pattern, that problem-oriented pattern. So not only do I know I'm right when I'm listening to that other person, I hear everything they say that I think is wrong or that I disagree with. So internal and away from, against, internal and away from. What do you do with that? That just goes around in circles, right? Now, there's different kinds of conflict. You could have internal and away from, and I'm options, and I like lots of possibilities. And the other person says, no, 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 there's only one right way to do this. So that's one kind of conflict. But how do you deal with that? Well, we have to remember that the other person doesn't know what's important to me, and I may guess, but I don't know for sure what's important to them. So my suggestion for a leader would be is to pick a time and place where you can have a calm conversation, which is not in the middle of an argument, and say, hey, listen, let's pick another time when we can figure this out and deal with it like the two intelligent people we are. You pick a time, you pick a place, and then the leader can frame what we're talking about. Let's figure out a way that we can solve this issue that we have been disagreeing over. So let me ask you, with regards to this issue, what are the things that are important to you? Right? So the leader asks the other person what's important to them and lists it back. Oh, okay. So you think that we should be doing this and this, but not doing that. Okay, that makes sense. For me, what's important to me is A, B, and C, right? And in a conflict resolution process, you open your two hands and you put the values of the other person and yourself in the two hands. And then together you say, well, how can we meet all these needs? And you look for ways. You don't give up on your needs and prioritize the other person or shove your needs down their face. No. How do we solve these together? And look how powerful this use of your hands is. So the process can be relatively simple. Pick a great time and place, frame the discussion like a conversation, not a conflict. Ask the other person what's important or what are their values or judgment values in the situation. Repeat them back, talk about yours, and then together look for solutions. And I think leaders can do this. They have to spend so much time solving conflicts, particularly the ones nobody ever talks about face to face. But imagine if a leader could have conversations like this with each of their employees or when needed, or a couple of employees when needed. They would become a facilitator, and your employees would feel seen and heard and become even more loyal to you because you help them solve issues. You don't just make them worse.
But how do you challenge someone's thinking without attacking their identity?
Right. Well, some people are going to take it personally, no matter what you say. That is true. So framing helps. So instead of pointing at the other person and saying, listen, we got to find this out, that's really personal. So mind your fingers. Where are your fingers? It's better if you're in the same room, you're not on Zoom, for example, to sit not necessarily side by side, but not opposite each other. One person at the end, one person at the side, because opposites make it easy to attack, whereas corners like this make it less easy. And say, listen, I want to talk to you about our disagreement that we had the other day because I believe we can solve it. I don't think we're going to agree on everything, but I think we can come up with some solutions. So it's very different than saying, well, we got to work this out because one of us is wrong. Or, one of the worst things anyone can hear from anyone else, and this includes your spouse, right? I need to give you some feedback. Oh God, doesn't that make your stomach tie itself up in knots? Because it's never good when somebody says that. So you're framing that the conversation is about the things we disagree on, and that you express hope that you can come to a solution. Now, somebody may take it personally, but then you notice that. You see, you seem to be taking this really personally. And I understand that maybe you feel hurt by what I've said, but I want you to know I have faith in you. I think we can solve this. I think you're a great person, right? So you can help them get over that. You don't have to just let them suffer. Sometimes we see that somebody is hurt by what we said, and then we get paralyzed. We go, oh my God, I didn't mean to do that. Breathe, relax. You're the leader. Help them get over it.
Great. And what does healthy disagreement actually look like when two different motivational patterns collide?
Yeah, it can be a big collision because again, I think I'm right internal, and I know you're wrong. So I think I'm right because I'm more creative and I have lots of options. I think you're wrong because you're just so rigid. This is a collision. And again, as a leader, if you want to be the facilitator of this conversation, you can say, you know what, we both think about this differently. And I think that's one of the reasons that we're, having a conflict or having a confrontation about this. But I think if we zoom out, both of our perspectives are helpful. And then give an example of how you're thinking about that. Now, that means you've spent a few minutes planning your conversation before you talk to the other person. I personally never like to book meetings back to back to back where I'm running from one to the other because it doesn't give me time to prepare. I like to have at least 10 or 15 minutes. Well, one, I need to go to the bathroom, but I need 10 or 15 minutes to plan in the next meeting. And often if it's a big meeting, I'll plan beforehand. So that what is my goal for the meeting? Who do I have in the room? What do I know about their perspectives? Where are they now? Where do we want to get to? And what might be some of the obstacles or objections? I want to think about that beforehand. And of course, I think about what are the different people running as their major motivation triggers? Are they toward, away from in this meeting generally? Do they prefer procedures? Do they want things to stay the same? A lot of longtime employees get very bent out of shape. They get very upset when things are changing too much. And so do employers, right? So if we prefer things to do the same, but now we have to adapt, how can we phrase it so that those people who prefer things the same don't feel as intimidated by the changes, right? These are all things that leaders can learn to do.
So perhaps the real skill of leadership is not avoiding tension, but transforming it. Would you say that understanding motivational patterns is what turns conflict from liability into performance?
I absolutely do. I think conflict is an opportunity, if you handle it right, to supercharge your team, to have them grow as people, to have them grow as leaders, and to become high performers. It's an opportunity. And if we think about it, how can I, as a leader, turn a confrontation into a great conversation? And of course, one of the ways, I used options language. One of the ways is to learn the LAB profile, learn how to identify what are the motivation triggers for my team members, right? That's how you can make a great conversation from what might have been one of those confrontations that you know you have to do, but you don't want to do.